Hello and welcome to Email and Coffee. It's a hot and steamy day today, and I wanted to talk about a hot and steamy topic. A lot of times I'm asked by clients when they deliver a project, what are the specs for an email? And discussing specs is a lot about design, and it's also about content. So I wanted to go through about 14 different items that are important to your email on a design level and also on a content level. So first, how wide should it be? It's 2020, and generally speaking, emails can be as wide as 700 pixels and 600 pixels. So take 650. Text and image content. So when you send an email, you're sending it to other servers, and the servers are going to judge your email based about a lot of criteria. One of those is image to text, and it's generally text 60%, image 40%. So if you have a sliced image and no text in your campaign, and a lot of e-commerce does that, don't get me wrong, they're also sending millions, and you may not, so the odds of you getting it into an inbox are lesser and lesser if it's too much image. So keep that in mind. You do want text. It's great to have a pre-header, and a lot of people don't know what the pre-header is. It's that little bit of text that goes right on top of your campaign. A lot of the email service providers provide you with input for your pre-header, so you don't have to put it into a campaign. But for developers, it is that text that goes right on top. And what it does is it lifts the open rate because it is seen in the preview pane alongside your subject line. So da 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 is your subject line, and da 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 is your next kick in the pants, your pre-header. They should line up together. They should not say the same thing. They shouldn't compete with one another. Sometimes you can play around and you can A/B test. So put your pre-header first and use it as a subject line in one test, and subject, switch them around, play around with it. But all in all, your pre-header is meant to give your subject line a little bit of benefit and advantage for open rate. Now we've got the bottom, so we talked about the top, which is the pre-header. Now let's talk about the bottom, which is generally speaking where you put your address. So you've got your social, your sender address, and your unsubscribe in your footer. I have talked to ESPs. They tell you sometimes to put the unsub in the header or in the pre-header. I don't want to necessarily discuss this here or argue the point, but obviously if they're asking you to do that, there's a reason. But generally speaking, I use what I call your housekeeping, and I put the social, your sender address, and your unsubscribe note all the way in the bottom. Copyright information, legal information, disclaimer, all the way in the bottom. Now, let's talk a little bit about tech stuff. So, internet DPI is 72. You can't go above that. Print is 300 or more. So, you've got a lot more dots per inch, right, DPI, when you're talking about print. You don't have that when you're talking about the internet, and that's across the internet. There are a lot of things you can do to get a crisper image, right? But you want to be aware that when you're preparing an email at anywhere between 600 to 700 pixels wide, everything in it is going to display at 72 DPI. If you want your images to be crisp, then you do what is generally considered Retina Display. And that is, generally speaking, you take whatever image you want and is in your layout, and you provide it to your developer at 2 times the size, at least 300 DPI, which is resolution, on a transparent background. They will work their magic and provide you with the crispest image you can have. You cannot put it on a layer, and you can't send it to them small. It needs to be 2 times the size as your layout, at least 300 dpi, transparent background. And the transparent background goes along with the Photoshop layered files. A lot of people work in Illustrator, a lot of people work in Sketch, a lot of people work in different native platforms. I'm going to stand behind Photoshop for whatever reason it is. I'll stand behind Photoshop. It's widely used, it's widely available, it's widely expensive. Okay, so anybody who works in Photoshop will know what a layer is. Every single element should be on its own layer so that the developer can lift that particular layer, that image, that element from the stack and be able to display it as best as possible. If you're taking a whole campaign and you're slapping it onto one layer, there's very little developer can do except slice and dice. And this is 2020, not 1999. So separate your elements on their own layer and share those images that you want as crisp as possible. It could be a label, it could be a font, it could be a logo that is a font. It could be text that, for whatever reason, it's special font, and we'll talk about fonts in a moment. It's a special font that is not rendered on the internet universally. So all those layers that are very special, generally, like I said, logos, fonts, and images that you want very crisp. You want to share them with your developer as a separate file completely. Maybe an EPS file, maybe a TIFF. Whatever format it was used to create that image. It could even be a PDF, a high quality PDF, but it needs to be, again, 2 times the size of the layout, the image in the layout, at least, 300 dpi on its separate layer, transparent. Now, when it comes to your layout and design, I'm sure you've all heard the term mobile first. And here's the concept. You really do want to, your designer and your marketing brainstorming team wants to prepare an email that will do one of 2 things. Will look exactly the same, regardless of what device it's shown on, and everything is crisp. The text can be read. The buttons can be clicked with a finger and not a stylus or a pinpoint. The CTAs stand out. So you're thinking basically the image looks the same in either desktop or mobile. Or we've got a desktop design and here's what we want it to look like in mobile. Or we've got a mobile design and here's what we want it to look like in desktop. They're very similar. They stack. So perhaps you've got 3 columns and they turn into 1, 2, 3. They stack. You conceive of this when you're designing it. You don't make it impossible for the developer to translate your layout from desktop to mobile using HTML and media queries. You don't make that impossible. You can have background images, but you really need to understand that when you have a background that is something that's on the very first layer, it may be a solid color with a gradient. It may be a solid image, but you've got images on top and text on top of that. So you have to think of all the different elements you have and how you want that to translate to mobile, because mobile, here's your desktop, right? Here's your mobile. What are you going to do with that big background when it is this big? Right? What are you going to do with that? You need to think about that, because everything needs to stack, and what the background may have been made for suddenly is this big, and it might not translate. So the designer needs to think mobile first. What's this? What do we want this to look like on mobile? Let's design it the same way for mobile and desktop, or let's design it for mobile and then translate that to desktop and make sure all of the elements are there, and we're not creating an impossible scenario for the HTML team, right? Okay, we're going to talk about fonts. So, in many instances, designers will use lots of fabulous fonts, and typography is an integral part of any design, whether it's print or email. However, if you pick a font that is not available on the web, because web fonts are a small subset, they need to be on everyone's device, and not everyone has subscriptions to font foundries. So picking a very fancy font that looks great and maybe part of your branding, it turns into turns from a text element into an image. And if it's very fine, we're up against 72 dpi and it looking a little mushy. We don't want it to look mushy on the internet. We want it to be as grand can be. So you need to always keep in mind that when you present these fancy fonts, they will be turned into text, or, they will be turned into an image, or you take the text and you identify the web-safe fonts, which are a very small list. I will go over those. Very small list, boys and girls, gentlemen and ladies. Arial, Comic Sans, Courier New, Georgia, Lucida, Tahoma, Times New Roman, Trebuchet, Verdana. Very small, boys and girls, very small. So anything that's fancy that's coming out of that list, you're going to need to use perhaps Google fonts, which do not display on every device. That's Molly. Google fonts, which don't display on every device. And then you'll always need the default. So identify the basic or the text portions of your campaign, and note what, when I say text, I mean those elements that will be text in design and text in email. And use a font that is universal for devices. You can use a Google font that will make it a little bit more fancy, but always understand that it's either going to default to a serif or sans serif, so you got to pick one or the other, and be careful about that because it impacts your design. So one of the things that I like to tell people, to sum it up, is to go to reallygoodemails.com, reallygoodemails.com, and take a look at their really good emails. They have lots and lots and lots. There are plenty of categories, so you can actually look at your industry, see what the competitors are doing. You can take a look at a bunch of different types of campaigns. So they have welcome campaigns, they have win-back campaigns, they have cart abandonment campaigns, they have news campaigns, blah, blah, blah. Take a look at the different campaigns there. And you subscribe to their newsletter because they do a lot of chatting about what works, what doesn't work. Your email designer probably came out of print, and they have the ability to translate that talent and skill, but they need the opportunity to take the brainstorming sessions and to provide the medium with that challenge. So keep in mind, don't force them to create a print design for email. Don't force them to do that, because they'll fail and you'll fail, and your HTML coder will have a headache. So don't think print, think mobile devices. Really, again, this is 2020. Think mobile devices. When you're doing email, think mobile devices. Think about what it looks like when you get that email in your, on your phone, and you're looking at it. Think about that, right? Think that your inbox, like everybody else's inbox, is full of stuff, and odds are that alarm is going off on your phone all the time. Inbox, another email, another email. So, think that when you get the email, you need to scroll through it, and think that you've got 3 to 6 seconds to grab their attention. So, your brand may be important to them. Be true to that relationship and give them what they want in that 3 to 6 seconds so that they can hit that CTA button and buy your product. So, Email and Coffee, signing off. Happy email marketing, y'all.